This afternoon, we are going to examine the nitty-gritty of how services can better respond to the needs of older women, which is something that we started to touch on this morning. Welcome, Unis. As we know, OWN has worked with Dr. Catherine Barrett from Celebrate Ageing and OPAN to develop a suite of training resources for aged care providers on sexual assaults in aged care. And thanks to a grant from the state government, OWN is now working on developing training resources for frontline services on how to better respond to disclosure of sexual assaults by older women. So this is just one response to the needs of older women that we're currently addressing. We've also got a new initiative, which is an employment initiative. So there are lots of different things that we're branching out into. And this afternoon's panel of experts is here to talk about the issues of housing, violence against women and the needs of older women from the CALD community, amongst others, because the CALD community is a very important part of our community, and I don't think we acknowledge that enough this morning, so my apologies for that. First up, Unis, I'm going to come to you. Unis may be known to many of you and is really an absolute champion crusader who has devoted her professional life to making lives better, other people's lives better, particularly in the area of housing advocacy. And I have to say that there is a little bit of encouragement and hope now that I do feel that housing is part of the national conversation. It is on the agenda. Everybody is talking about it now. Everybody recognizes that this is a collective problem. So I hope that that is giving you some hope. And I was just wondering whether you think that given that there is momentum now behind the subject of housing and the urgency of addressing the housing question, do you think that the needs of older women, who are a unique cohort when it comes to the issue of homelessness, do you think that older women are on the radar in the way this problem is now being talked about, or do you think that older women are still somewhat overlooked in the general conversation we're now having about housing? I think you can just go ahead, Unis. I think you can just talk into it. Try it.
Good afternoon.
There you go.
It's such an honor to be invited to be here, Caroline, and joining everybody, particularly with the expert panelists here. I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owner, the Illawara Nation, and the Gadigal people. Yes, is my short answer.
Give us a bit of a longer answer, Unis.
Okay, let me start with this. In New South Wales, we have a minister for seniors and the minister for women and the Minister for Domestic Violence and Sexual Assaults. Is the only state has a specialist dedicated minister for those three portfolios. All the other states and territories, as well as the federal government, they don't have that. Mm-hmm. They put women, and some didn't even have senior, into the smorgasbord of their portfolios. So how important is it? I think in New South Wales, definitely, yes, that the government recognize the importance of seniors and recognize the importance of women, recognize the importance of ending the terrible abuse and killing women by domestic violence. Now, our federal government, we have a minister, Mark Butler, but he is combining aged care with health. And all the other, territories just inserted women or not even senior, just women aged care within water, climate change, all of that. So my short answer is we ought to be really proud that in this state, we have a specially dedicated minister, as you have heard from her this morning. Our job really has to put pressure on the minister. Okay, how much time do you give me now?
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
I recommend that you do look up the website. There are a number of strategic plans. All those strategic plans at the moment, from my observation, my very humble observation, is they are standalone, in isolation. What we need to put pressure on is joining the policy's thoughts, joining the portfolio ministers. That is really important because, as we heard this morning from the wonderful panel here before us, women, like Dixie, we are everything. So we are not cut and labeled by a portfolio. Okay. We have a housing 2041. And that is under Rose Jackson. We have thankfully, the women's strategy 2023 to 2026 is under this minister, Jody Harrison. And then we have a senior strategy, which is 10 years, which is from 2021 to 2031. Now, may I recommend to you, go home. If you haven't had the time to look at that strategy, I know, Yumi, you probably know it from back to front. And also, Beverly, you probably know that from back to front. But I'm saying that from the grassroots, imagine I'm only one here today. Multiply what I say by all of you is 150 more, right? So in this strategy for senior, there are 91 recommendations, right? Now, looks beautiful. Okay. Then there is another more important one, which was the standing committee about now 2 years ago, 2021, had gone into an inquiry into homelessness for older women. That one is important, really very important. That one, they produced 40 recommendations, but they hadn't adopted all the 40. They only agreed to some. What I look at it, using my desktop review skill, quickly glance through it, there were 20, they say, supported in principle. How does... you are the journal. How do you translate that? Supported in principle.
Means we're not going to do anything.
Right. Then there is another one even worse, called noted.
Yes, noted.
Right? So I really also like to recommend to you is that one seriously is very important. I would say it's even more important than the senior strategy. Won't you agree, Beverly? Because it took that long, and the good thing is the current Minister for Housing, Rose Jackson, she was actually a member of that standing committee doing the review. So there is the continuity with her.
Right.
Also, there is Abigail, what's her other name? Boy. She's the Green, right? Now she is in high position. She is now in finance, right? So I think it's really important that we need to put pressure because they are accountable, right? They are accountable. So we really need to now is 2023. I think simply is write a very nice, polite letter and seek update, feedback. What have you done with that particular report, particularly in the International Day of the older people? What is government doing, this new government doing with that particular, report? Because the 20 agree in principle need to be updated. And in the report, I'm not teaching you how to write. I know you are very smart. I think in the report, we will say that we congratulate you. You have done something. For example, extended TA, the temporary accommodation. Rose Jackson did extend that. But that is not enough. That is really playing the deck chair on the Titanic, right? That's not enough. So I think we should ask, we notice you have done that. That's really good. But we really very much want to seek a discussion with you to take us to the next step. No plan is any use if you don't make it workable, if you don't make it deliverable. Our job is make them accountable to the taxpayer, to the people who elected them. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did. And I love the fact that you've given us homework, because I do think it's really important that we go away from today, not just kind of all sort of, kind of happy that we were all in the room together and we heard all this fantastic stuff. It's on us. The responsibility is on us. I think it's really valuable to be given tangible tasks and things that we can all go home and do. We can all go and write a letter to someone about this kind of thing. I wanted to ask you, Unis, something that's endlessly frustrating about all government policy really is how short-term so much of it is. It's always within the electoral cycle. No one ever wants to talk about anything that's sort of got a longer-term vision than that. And we really see that when it comes to housing in terms of the adherence to silver standards, so that there's this kind of short-term saving of money, retrofitting buildings, but instead of thinking intelligently about wider door frames, better access, all the things that are appropriate to make new builds accessible from the start rather than trying to do it when it's too late. So what can we do to make these silver standards much more visible, high profile, much more expected from the building industry, the housing industry, everybody who's in the mix?
Thank you. It really touched my nerve, that question. I have been on a campaign group, and this campaign group is under Building Better Homes, the umbrella of that. And we have lots of, comrades. We have COTA represented, and we have the disability sector represented, and we have architects, we have universal design specialists represented for 2.5 years. Okay. Sadly, I have to say, we have not been able to move much, and I give you the story. Okay. The positive thing is, this is the standard that Caroline mentioned, is under the livable housing design standard. Again, I'll give you homework. Try to go to their website, get the handbook, so you have a wonderful understanding about it. A lot of it is just the myths. A lot of what the developers, what the builders said is going to cost more. And why do you want to build something so ugly with all the ramps in front of your house? Those sort of things. Now, I actually, I come prepared with a list of dispelling the myths. I'm very happy to hand that to you, and you can circulate to members here who are interested, because it's how we message it, right? Queensland, in fact, is implementing this on the 1st of October. Who are the people from Queensland? You should really give yourself a pat on the shoulder. They're leading the way. Then the other states, Victoria is pretty good with housing. Victoria is definitely in it, but we heard that Daniel Andrew just resigned, so probably a little lapse. However, South Australia is very wanting to do it, but they are just negotiating time frame. So they may be half a year later. And Tasmania definitely is in it. WA is still looking at time frame. So what does that mean? That means New South Wales is the only stubborn one. It's the only one who is not prepared to reverse. Having said that, I don't want you to think that it's so gray or dark. Before the change of government, Victor Dominello, who is the Minister for Regulation, I had conversation with him. He said, it's no-brainer. It's perfectly sensible to do it. Unfortunately, it was February when we got to talk to him because it took a long time to get through to the labyrinth of ministers. So he was quite interested. And Rose Jackson was also very interested, but it's not her portfolio. So now we have another minister, right? So don't give up. I never gave up. So don't give up. I think it's a matter of time. But the thing is, can we wait? Older women, can we wait? No. And I actually like to recommend that we be bold now that we be bold, we say silver is not good enough, actually. We should go for gold. We really should go for gold because you would think your property outlasts your life, right? So if you build new builds now for gold, it will serve your grandchildren.
Yes.
We are building for future, safe-proofing for future. We're not interested just for silver, Minister. We should go for gold, really.
So let me ask you, Unis, I mean, you talked there about politicians and portfolios and kind of navigating, the sort of overlap or the division of those, and everything is so maddeningly siloed. You think, why can't these people just talk to each other? How much, though, influence in this particular story do the developers have? Because
a lot.
Presumably, pressure needs to be applied to developers. Developers need to be lobbied.
A lot. But let me be fair. We cannot use one brush on all of them. We do have currently in existence, I'm not here to do marketing, we currently do have innovative builders are already building it. And community housing sector, all their new builds are built to silver at least minimum. And surprisingly, in my area, I need to ask the moderator, am I allowed to disclose personal information?
If you feel safe doing it, you can.
Okay. I live in Tarahumara. So in Tarahumara, a brand new 42 apartments just for sale. I went in to have a look. 42 units, 36 are built to silver standard.
Okay.
Nobody asked them to, but they did it because they did the market research. They know that in the area when people downsizing, they will need it, right? I was prepared to buy that one, but my daughter said, Mom, you already moved twice in 3 years. You're not moving again. Besides, I can't afford that one. That one is too luxury for me. Okay, besides that, seriously, I think that I harbor back to nothing about older women is that unique. When you put the label of uniqueness, it's like you are one of the kind only. Mm-hmm. if anything, you done it right by us, it's done it right universally for everybody in the society. And don't forget, woman is the grandmother of your grandchildren. You know, that respect, I now want to say from the cult community. I'm Chinese, born in China, and then fled to Hong Kong because of communism when I was 2 years old. And then I came to Australia when I was 18-year-old and study, and then met my husband and stay on. So I now teach my grandson with a bit of cultural injection because he's ABC, you know, Australian-born Chinese. Like, he often asks, why do I have to do this to you? Every time I see you, just hello won't do. I say, it's called respect. We do that, just a little bow, you know, no big deal, is respect. And that respect, not just to grandma, respect to anybody who is your senior. Then if you have a little cousin, then the little cousin should do that to you. Oh, okay, right? So I think it's really important that respect for the elderly, not just because of older women as a sex gender issue. Really, that respect is valuing who we are. As we get older, we are bolder. I saw Kathy, how bold she was. You know, we are bolder, but we are wiser. We are wiser because of life experiences. We haven't been here. For some of my colleagues, I'm so delighted. I haven't met my colleague Yvonne, and I haven't met my colleague Judy Christian, almost 30 years. Well, they can speak for me. My career, you know, ended up with a public service medal. Wasn't something I looked for, even dreamed for. And nor did I get it smoothly with a silver plate, right? So you just do what you believe you are doing the right thing. And don't worry about the men. When I first got my first promotion, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 6 men appeal against my promotion. There were 3 judges wearing the white hood, making the judgment for 3 days about why the selection committee should elect me. Because she's a cripple, and she's a woman, and she's yellow. Therefore, she fitted the EEO principle. She is just a brand to sell. How's that?
Yeah, well, I don't know what to say. You've left me speechless, Eunice.
But now, I couldn't believe how loved I am in the sector. And the guy, the last remaining, all the others have passed away, those men. Seriously, but the last remaining, he is older than me. He is 84, I think. He said, Eunice, you're worth a ton of gold. And every Christmas, he would send me a Christmas card. And he now learned how to use the e-card. I've been getting the e-card greetings from him every month. So I won a friend for life.
Well, you certainly won that one, didn't you? So thank you for that wonderful sort of opening salvo and for the challenge that you've thrown out to us, but also the sense of hope that things are shifting, but that it can take time. I'd like to move to you, Sally, and I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to come back to Eunice. But Sally, you've worked on women's health and violence against women and children for decades. But I want to know, when you first began your professional career, were older women on your horizon, or what caused you to notice older women as a cohort?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. And I too acknowledge that I'm on Aboriginal land that was never ceded, and hope that we all make respectful choices on the 14th of October. Vote yes. Just to clarify, I've been involved in this particular sector, domestic violence and sexual violence against women, for about 10 years now. Before that, I was working in the international arena and saw violence on a large scale in conflict situations, which was, of course, confronting, but also helpful in learning on how to develop responses and advocacy strategies for working in Australia. So I've been working at the Illawara Women's Health Centre for 10 years, and no, I don't think older women really were on the radar at that time, and have certainly come to the fore much more recently. But how did that happen? I think it was the voices of organisations like the Older Women's Network, but I think there's been a growing awareness, and I hope it continues to grow, around the importance of lived experience and lived expertise, and about listening to the stories of women when they come to you for support. And that's very much the way that we've been trying to work with the Women's Health Centre, is that those stories must be central to our response to our community. And once you start listening to those stories, then what is revealed is things like the struggles of older women. When you start to take those stories seriously, when you start to respond to the people in front of you telling you those stories. So I think there's been multiple reasons why older women are becoming more visible. Certainly they need to become much, much more visible. But I think it's that shift, certainly in our sector, about recognising, acknowledging and appreciating the stories that are put before us, and respecting them and honouring them. So, yeah, I think that's probably how we've come to recognise the problems more and be driven to respond to them more, because, I mean, we are, as older women, our lives are full of experiences and full of wisdom. And when you acknowledge that we are able to understand ourselves and propose solutions and know what our needs are, then we can drive the advocacy that then leads to change that Unis is talking about. And it has that deep authenticity. So when we speak, when we go and advocate on behalf of older women, we can speak with such a genuine authenticity. You can't, it's very hard to resist it, I think, and you can't deny it. And when you're speaking at that level, there's an emotional response that I think does generate, hopefully over time, a better response.
But do you think, Sally, that it is also partly about the sort of scarcity of resources, that in a way our default setting, if you like, when we think about domestic violence, we often picture in our heads a young mother with children, and we think, right, this is a really emergency crisis where a young woman is vulnerable with children who are at high risk, and so all the resources kind of pool around that particular scenario. Sometimes maybe the scenarios or the narratives that we tell about older women, that they're not as present. Those stories are not getting the attention in the media in the same way as the sort of horrific examples of young women who are making the break from a toxic relationship, are at their most vulnerable when they try to get away, get killed in that moment. Children have to be scooped up from the trauma. So is it that there are so few spaces in the refuges that we have that they're tending to go to the younger cohort?
I think there's a couple of things in that, and I would just like to, I suppose, bust the myth that there's a scarcity of resources, because in fact there's not.
Okay.
It's about where the resources are applied. I mean, New South Wales is one of the richest states in Australia, one of the richest countries in probably one of the richest times in humankind. There's no need for scarcity of resources to be invested in a response to one of the most pressing public health emergencies of our time. So I think the scarcity is an excuse and it's a convenience. I think I think the problem with what you're talking about is whether we place it with the younger cohort or the older women. I think the problem is with the older women, we are experiencing not just the disregard for women, which is what we see in domestic and family violence, and the way that women are seen in our society, but that's overlaid with ageism as well. Mm. So there's the invisibility of ageism that has also led to women not getting the kinds of services that they need as they grow older. And I think there's other myths too. It's like, you know, women don't get raped when they're older because they're not sexual anymore. And there's myths around being older and age that play into that invisibility. And certainly, and I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier, and that's another story about internalised ageism, which I can come to. But I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
We're talking about the scarcity of resources myth, and you were going on from that. You were myth busting, basically.
I was myth busting.
You were telling us that basically the resources are there.
But it's oh, excuse me, yes. So it's also, so there's the idea that women can't get raped, but there's also the idea that if you're in cognitive decline or you're experiencing dementia, that in fact, if you are sexually assaulted, then you won't remember it. It's okay, no need to report. Now, that's very clearly seen in the lack of legislative requirement to report sexual assault in aged care. That's a classic example, and it's absolutely unacceptable. But we also know, as we learn more about what trauma does to us, is that maybe there's a forgetting of that assault in the mind, but the body remembers. And how do we respond to that respectfully? And we are absolutely bereft of tools and understanding around how to do that. And that's another choice around where do we place our research, our resources? Is it into research to respond to those women who have been assaulted, or indeed may be seeking to recover and heal after years of assault? But cognitive decline, dementia is also used as a convenient excuse not to look and not to invest.
And Sally, what do we know about perpetrators when it comes to violence against older women, cognitively impaired or not? What do we need to understand about the prompts, the triggers, the things that are likely to make a perpetrator a perpetrator?
I think that's a great question. I think that's a great question for all of domestic, family and sexual violence, because forever, you know, it has been around the victim survivor and what did she experience and what is her story and how can we help her? And it's her. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there should be absolutely a focus on her and us, but that makes the perpetrator also invisible. And once they're invisible, then you don't think about them so much. And one of the things that we're advocating for, certainly at the Women's Health Centre, is a much greater investment in understanding perpetration and doing research on it. What are the drivers? Who are they? How do they get away with it? Why do they think they can get away with it? But you're right. I mean, there are certain characteristics around violence towards older women that are unique to our cohort, and perpetrators is one of them. So we know it can happen resident in aged care. We know that caregivers can do it. We know that women are more vulnerable physically and mentally at times. But there are hard truths too. We need to understand that a lot of the perpetration happens in the family, and it's not just about, it's not only about, let's say, an intimate partner or, you know, a partner that you're with, but it's sons to mothers as well, which is a horrifying thought. But unless we're willing to confront those truths and to invest in understanding perpetration, then we're only halfway to solving the problem. So I think it's an absolutely critical question.
Have you got any case studies that you can share with us that you think illuminate something that we possibly may not have understood until now?
I think as a society, as we understand, I'm sure I just would like to acknowledge that I'm sure, unfortunately, that there are probably a number of women in the room who understand it very closely. Look, Look, not so much at that level, but certainly a woman that has been a long-term client and become a friend at the Women's Health Centre was recently put into aged care because she had a fall and she needed surgery and have a hip replacement and so forth. And it was at that time that she had been trying for a number of years, but this was an opportunity that she could leave her husband. But the barriers that she faced, and I think this is not uncommon, is the resistance of the family, but also the children, the disbelief that the father could do this, the splitting, the implied splitting of the family, and that for some reason it's her fault that she's doing it, and why would she be doing it now if she hasn't done it before? So there's all this kind of shaming, blaming, and disbelief that has created such an incredible trauma for her. But what it's meant is that whilst ever the husband is in the home and that's a shared resource and she can't get access to legal support to divide that, she is now displaced in a care facility, which is fine, but it's not her home. And that fragments, you know, your identity if you're not in familiar surroundings. Well, it can fragment it and it can just make life really hard. So I think one thing we also have to what we have to do when we're trying to support women who are doing this is understand the family dynamics around it, which are different than if you're a young mother trying to get away or, a child that's experienced abuse. There are particular characteristics of abuse to older women and particular impacts that we need to understand better and respond to. And one of those is the powerful shutting down of the family if they don't want to believe their father is a perpetrator. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sally. I think this is something that's going to resonate in my conversation with you, Kittu, because we've talked about this before. Kittu, for those of you who have not had the pleasure and the privilege of hearing her speak before, is the founder of the Indian Subcontinent Crisis and Support Agency, and she does the most extraordinary work around dowry abuse. So could you start, Kittu, by telling us a little bit about the service and who you serve, and within that constituency, the older women within that constituency and community?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to also start with acknowledging the land that we're on, and a yes vote, please. Just thought I'd get that in. So the organisation that we started up was like many NGOs start, that they think there's a bit of a gap and they're going to help navigate things along, and then you get into it and then you realise just what you've got yourself into. We're not a domestic violence specific service. We do look at people in crisis of all sorts of reasons. And because of that, we ended up working a lot more with, we call them offending partners, not perpetrators, because an offending partner can be either party and they can change. And certainly when you're looking at the older demographic, as Sally said, it is often within the family or the caregiving. It's a really subtle change that people can become very passionate about looking after their parents, but then not see controlling their finances as financial abuse, a loss of control, a loss of independence. So many of the people that we see in the older demographic are people who'd be too ashamed to say their children are doing this sort of thing. But it goes even further than that, Mum's not got much of an appetite anymore, so we'll just not bother with what she likes. She'll just have a little bit of what we have. And, it's these subtle things that people don't think of it in terms of abuse. They think of it in terms of problematic behaviour by the elderly person. They're just too stubborn, too grumpy, too cranky.
Too ungrateful.
That's right. You don't know what we sacrificed to have you here. And the other side of it we see a lot of is where assets are just handed over to children and then the abuse starts. It's really neglectful abuse, but it's neglect, it's abusive. And some of the cases that I've seen, I've had to go to a police station and help a woman find accommodation when she was just left out on the street in a nightie on a cold winter's night. She had 2 weeks before signed over her house and all of her assets to her daughter, who said, we'll look after you. And you might think this is rare, but in fact it happens a lot more than we think. I was at a financial abuse summit with the Commonwealth Bank recently, and they were saying that they're seeing increasing levels of financial abuse amongst their older customers. So it really is something that we need to address, as in, it doesn't need the unique word. I don't think anybody is unique. When you're in trouble, you need help. It starts at that. But I would like to address also in that the scarcity of resources, because this is something that I'm very, very concerned about, because we hear it all the time. There is so much money put into our sector services, but is it being spent well? And like Unis, I'm going to give you a bit of a homework. Go and ask your local service what they really do. Because we think DV workers, and many of them are, the passionate ones, work all the time to try and help people, but very much challenged by the fact that there isn't the support that you need to give them. So a service might not have the vouchers, they don't have accommodation. But more than that, there's the same money is put into the same fashion in the same way as it was 30 years ago. Our communities have changed, our demographics have changed, our needs are changing. It's not unique, it's just evolution. And while it's great to have all these ministers, having a minister is kind of like, to me, it's at the lowest priority. We need to know what's happening on the ground at the front line. And in comparison, I'd like to say that I'm a trainer as well. I used to train human and health services staff in contract management in Melbourne, in Queensland and in South Australia. And I'm appalled by us, the richest state in the country and the most, knowledgeable. We have so much research, it's not funny. But we don't have the same kind of services. We just don't put services together and fund them properly to do the work. We fund people to be popular. We've actually got grants in our system that are actually helping ministers just do campaigns and events. So something is going wrong in New South Wales. And no more, it hits the most vulnerable first. So children, people from Aboriginal backgrounds, First Nations people, coloured people, and of course elderly people, because they're the ones that are first to be put aside in the too difficult basket. And I do agree with Unis that we've got some amazing plans. And like Sally, I've been in this kind of work for about 10 years, and I've sat on too many consultations. So one thing we're really good at in New South Wales are roundtables. We do lots of them. If there was an Olympics in that, we'd just smash it. Because we do talk a lot. We research a lot. We're just not putting it into this idea that we have a plan and it's, supported in principle.
Yeah.
Put the money where it is and just do it.
But so seriously, I'm really interested in, all three of you so far have issued us with a kind of challenge to this room, that we need to kind of find out more about what's being done, how resources are being allocated. This is about wading into the sort of granularity of bureaucracy and wading through reports and decoding things and reading between the lines, which many of us may not know how to do. What can we, as responsible, conscious citizens, where do we start? What's the first phone call? What's the first thing that we do? I mean, you're talking about the dismantling of ossified, calcified systems. This is not, this is quite a challenge, even for this room.
I think the first thing is, though, and when I first started with this setting up of an NGO just teaches you so many things, is that I went, well, how does it work? Why do we do it like that? Is there another way? And for those people who are out there on TV and in the media who really like to punch out and say, just not enough money, we're doing our best, we've got a new report coming out, we've got a new bit of research and everything, you say, well, how's that helping? Like we have some peak bodies here that do a review on the housing issue or poverty in Western Sydney pretty much every year. Why do we need to do it every year? Like, what is it? How is that helping somebody? I'm sure Sally could do with another couple of caseworkers rather than just a report. I know I could.
No.
Because it's not starting from grassroots evidence-based knowledge. It is just saying, okay, we need a refuge. Really, do we? Where? And why? How many people are waiting? And why do we just need it for women? Because you can't, somebody said earlier, well, I think it was in the dance, Pauline said, let him leave the house. Well, where does he go? It's the same problem of homelessness. So we do have to understand offending behaviour and why it happens, because for many, many people in the situation, whether somebody who's senior and being abused in their home, they don't want to leave home. That's another myth, that people immediately, we have a flight response to domestic violence. Any kind of abuse, leave. Who wants to leave their own home, tonight? No notice. Not many of us would. So we have to look at it from the person who is the victim to help them survive. And that's why our services are not fit for purpose anymore, because they do category management. You go over there for homelessness and you go over there for counselling and you go over there for something else. But when we're human beings, that we have multiple needs at the same time. So we have to look at it in addressing somebody's situation, helping them at the crisis point, getting them through with interventions and support, and then helping them recover and heal at the end of it as well.
And what are the particular challenges in doing all of this for the CALD community? Because I know that there are sort of cultural values, and maybe, again, a little bit like Kathy talking to us about the women in Saudi Arabia and the body image issue not being the same kind of epidemic problem, but is it that we imagine that the CALD communities have got different concerns and different priorities around shame, around disclosure, around disloyalty to family members? Are we being sentimental and romantic about those things, or are those realities?
No, I think they're realities, because depending on where you come from, you are conditioned to believe certain things. You are conditioned into a certain types of jurisdiction. For instance, rape in marriage is not illegal in India, but it is here. So you get on a plane and you come here, how do you know that? You've already been dealing with this for all of your married life, and now it's something different. So yes, there are some challenges and there are more intersections. And there is a stronger pull to stay with the family. It's a stronger pull because many people think it's our children's future. We don't get married for our happiness, we get married for our children. So your children's future is going to be compromised if you're a separated family. It's also going to be disruptive to the children, notwithstanding the damage that happens to children when they live in in abuse. But there are those challenges for women who are from CALD backgrounds, and therefore when they are faced with you can leave home, they just turn around and go, well, thank you very much for that. And, within that, and I've had refuge managers say to me, oh, your women always go back. We don't even know why they bother turning up in the first place sometimes. And I said, well, did you prepare them before they left? Because this idea that a woman it takes 7 times to leave an abusive relationship, that's because the first time you leave, you do it on the spot and you've got nothing with you, sometimes not even your mobile phone. So you go back. Then you're a little bit more prepared and you go back until you finally know that living outside by yourself takes preparation. So escaping violence is something that we have to teach people to say, okay, you really want to separate? I'm not going to tell you to pack a bag and go unless your life is under threat. Obviously, there's always that caveat that if they're in immediate threat, then we try to remove them from the situation. But the rest of it takes time. Where are your documents? Where are your clothes? Where are you going to get money if you're not earning?
And do you have a visa?
Do you have a visa? The big one. And deportation, threats of deportation are really huge. And in many countries, and even in this country, you look at who's around the politicians? Men. And if you come from a country where your government is corrupt, or allegedly corrupt, I should say, I don't want to get sued. If they are, then the women know that if you hang around with a politician, that means you've got some power. Okay? I'd say this is the same true in this country, really, but anyway, that's my opinion. But that is a very, very frightening factor for someone, that my husband knows the minister. I mean, here you could get on a train with Malcolm Turnbull, he's a Prime Minister, and we know that happens. But for someone from that background, that is a real sense of fear. So coercive control really works best with fear. And it's underlying everything. So the longer you keep somebody in fear, and they have many things to fear that some of us would not even consider relevant.
I think, Unis, you want to respond. I am going to come to you, Beverly, but I can see by the look on your face, Unis, you want to say something.
My heart goes to everybody who are specialists, Kitty like you, working in the domestic violence sector. I just want to say that the closing date for submission is October 22. it's been extended by the federal government to develop a new housing and homelessness plan for the nation to be 10 years. And currently, they are inviting people to attend community forum, which is not that satisfactory, but it's better to be linked in there than not. Now, seriously, I have to say, Sally, I kind of agree with Kittu about resources. In terms of the housing sector, I seriously agreed with Kittu. Is not enough in terms of funding for specialist support services, because the specialist support services like what you're running really is the gatekeeper, is where you could redirect early enough with intervention. But if you don't have enough resources to recruit staff, enough staff to answer the phone, enough staff, caseworkers to do the assessment, to do the follow-up, someone to do the research, to collect the data, all of that. So my humble and professional observation is, whilst housing, affordable housing, social housing is on the radar on the Sydney Morning Herald Financial Review headline. How many $1 billion put into how many 30,000 extra dwellings? It's only property. We're not talking about human beings, right? So I would invite every one of you, go back, utilize the timeline, put in submission, whether individually or whether it's linked up with other organizations for joint submission. We need not just dwellings, not buildings. It's a man's world. Building castles for them. It's really important, linking the building with the people, not people who are tenants. Even tenants, you give them the key. After the key, you still have to service them, right? So isn't it better that we can do the prevention when the plane touched down, a friendly face, helpful hands, hold them together, help them how to settle, right? So I, in fact, feel very strongly more money should be given to the support services to break, that circle of poverty. And the non-English speaking background, the cultural diverse, communities. At the end of the day, the differences is only in your customs, your practices, your beliefs. But over time, amazingly, people do, adopt the Aussie way. We do like the barbecue, right? So I just think that we should start from the basics. As human being, what do we need? Now, it is human rights to have housing, but not in Australia. Canada is. They have legislation. Now, why is it Canada can? Why we can't? I'm going to apply a Churchill scholarship to study about that, to go to Canada and find out about it, right? So I think
Tell us when you've got it.
It's really important, isn't it, to get the support services.
Canada is enlightened socially in many ways that we are aware of, Unis, whether it's environmental legislation and all sorts of things that are about a better quality of life. Bev, I am going to come to you. I promise. But I know, Sally, that you want to respond to Unis.
Yes, and I just want to say I completely agree with you and Kittu. My comment around, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, around scarcity and lack of scarcity is that as an economy, New South Wales has heaps of money. That's not the issue. It's where the money is placed, and there is scarcity in the DV sector without question, and that needs to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed culturally, but also with the sector asking for actually what it needs. Like there's a lot of, you know, you put in a grant for 5,000 or you want another 100,000 or one more caseworker. That's just playing at the edges, and it's also just playing into what I have written about being the coercive control of the government, where they make us compete. They give us a little bit of money. We have to say thank you and be grateful, and we dare not argue because we might not get it again. And playing into that just keeps us in poverty. We, the Women's Health Centre, ran a campaign since 2019 to set up a women's trauma recovery centre. And 2 federal budgets ago, we got a commitment for $25 million, which, it kind of knocked us sideways because it came from the Morrison government, so there was that, and we didn't know we were going to get it till budget night. But the surprise in the sector that amount of money could come to one service was quite profound. And our argument was, well, we asked for what we needed. And you can't run a service on $500,000, which is what the Women's Health Centre was getting. You actually need a service that can deliver what women need. And as an economic investment, the rate of return that we showed we could get was profound. So I think it's about asking for what we deserve, asking for what we need, and recognising that domestic and family violence is a health issue. And whilst there are plenty of money going into fracture clinics around Australia and plenty of money going into other kinds of clinics, cancer clinics, all the rest of it, which it should, there should be similar levels of money going into domestic and family violence recovery and healing. So I think we need to break that kind of psychology of just asking for a little bit more. We need to ask for a lot more because that's what we need and that's what we deserve. So I'm with you.
It's just one submarine, isn't it, Sally?
Mate, so, don't start.
Having listened to these 3 passionate advocates, I'm wondering how you sort of want to respond to what you've heard said this afternoon and what you see as the priorities for the Older Women's Network in going forward and actually making a difference.
When I hear what I hear, my default is anger. Sorry, grew up in a cranky household, still a cranky old lady. I'm a rockin' grumpy old woman, I'm telling you. But it makes me angry because, as we've touched all the way along, we are a rich state. We have the money. It has been the choices that we have made that have left us in this position. I'm old enough to remember when a government was elected in this state that said that housing is not the business of government. It's the business of market, as if a market was a person and had a brain. Markets require money. So the whole notion of social services, of social benefit, of social good was handed over to a profitable industry that's only looking at making wealth. And we've seen it. In our lifetime, we have seen the rich get so rich, they are unassailable. They are back to the oligarchs that we had the French Revolution to get rid of. They're back. I hope you're all practising your knitting. Because they are back. And we are seeing the end results of those decisions. The decisions to buy bloody submarines that we won't get for 35 years. Who go back 35 years and think of what technology was like 35 years ago. Push that forward. What's a submarine going to be doing? It's going to be visiting the Titanic and it's going to be sitting on the bottom of the ocean. It is not going to be delivering any of this defence that we need. Because as women, we know our best defence is negotiation, is talking, is friendships, it's walking in others' shoes, it's understanding. It's not bombing the shit out of somebody. Yet all of our decisions are made by men, and they impact on all of us because it's our children who will suffer. It is our partners who will go to war. It is our parents who are locked up into these wretched homes that are there for profit. They're not there for service. So as I said, every time I hear this, I just get angry. I just get angry. And if I could have a magic wand and wave it, boy, it'd be a different word. The first thing would do, remember the scene from The Witches of Eastwick? You know when those cherries started falling out of people's mouths? As soon as somebody says baby boomer, that's what would happen. Their mouths would be full and they couldn't say any more. Because it's that language that has done us the damage. It has siloed us, it's put us generation against generation. We now have a country that is terrified of getting older. I don't know what they think is going to happen, or whether they thought we all sort of just turned up wrinkled and old and cranky. There is a journey. And unless we look at that journey from birth, whatever we need at birth to whatever we need in the twilight of our years in our end days, it is what we need. And that is what a society should be based on. To each their need. Not from each their greed. To each their need. And all of our needs are different. All of our needs are different. And all of them should be respected. And we should be able to accommodate those things. We are rich enough to do it. We are the wealthiest mob of human beings that have ever wandered this planet. Yet we'll behave as if we are poor. The only poorness we have is in our thought, in our brains, in our capacity and our lack of compassion. That is where we are poor. So if I had my magic wand, baby boomers would never be allowed to be spoken out loud, and nobody would ever in a government position saying, oh, that's very nice, but how are we going to pay for it? That isn't my problem, sweetheart. That's yours. You've got the money.
Well, there's a manifesto. On that note, I think we should open up for questions. We've got about 10 minutes left, so if you've got a question, now is the time to ask it. There is a question at the back from the lady in red. There's a question over there in black, and then, yes, absolutely, I'm coming to you, I promise. So let's go to you in the back in red. You've got the microphone. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. This is my only chance to hold a microphone. I just wanted to ask, a lot of issues were brought up, and OWN deals with housing issues, with domestic violence, with lots of really important issues. Is there a chance that, and sorry, Unis, when you were mentioning people we could write to and contact, is there any chance that in the newsletter that we get, and I certainly read, and I hope lots of other people do, that there could be, say, a list of names with, email addresses or whatever we pay, addresses, and whatever issue, and even a little brief 2 lines of what's a good thing to say to them.
Great idea. A call to action.
Yeah. And I would do it, and I'm sure lots of other people would do it.
Look, I'm absolutely sure that our absolutely brilliant and wonderful staff who produced that phenomenal newsletter, thank you, Christine and Yumi, that can be taken on board, and we can work out ways in which we can do it with permission, because if we're putting names and contact details, not of our politicians, God, we pay them, no, we own them, but the other organisations that we might want to work with, I have absolutely no problem in saying that, yes, our staff will certainly look at it. The board will look at it, and we'll work out a way in which we can make sure that fabulous newsletter continues to service the needs of our members.
And I would also add to that is now is the time.